President Seaman. I am the director of Diamond Wave, which is a collaborating organization of the Artist Adaptability Circles initiative. And I'm here to give you a little bit of background and foundational knowledge about the Artist Adaptability Circles, or AAC. In June 2020, funders Esailama Artry-Diouf from the San Francisco Foundation and Francis Phillips, who was a longtime steward at the Walter and Elise Haas Fund, who is now retired, approached their Bay Area arts community to ask who was falling between the cracks of COVID emergency response funding. The question evolved into a sustained dialogue between funders, artists, consultants, and arts organization leaders who continued to meet regularly to address this question. Although we weren't sure exactly how the program would present itself, we focused instead on our process and the inherent trust in this group of arts leaders, as well as the trust we had built in our communities with individual artists whose missions closely aligned with our own. Centering mutual aid in the equity framework of collaborating organization emerging arts professionals, we created the AAC model on this inherent trust and the idea of circles within circles within circles. Guided by funders and arts leaders that make up our advisory circle, the AAC is a community-driven granting and leadership development program designed to put Bay Area artists, culture bearers, and arts workers to work, centering mutual aid to creatively address the issues arriving in their own lives and in their communities. Different than traditional grant programs, however, lead artists don't have to have a specific grant plan at the time of application submission. Similarly, there's no anticipated result or outcome expected from participation in the AAC. Artists instead are expected to participate in initiative convenings, centering EAP's cohort development curriculum, to convene in their own circles, and following a 6-month engagement period to take some step towards addressing their self-selected issue area with $10,000 in flexible funding. This could be a retreat to rest, to deepen relationships, or to strategize. Stipends for consultants, artists, or instructors to host workshops or participate in community events. Rent, venue rental, equipment purchase, travel, food. Artists tell us what is needed to actualize their work. Rather than investing this funding into one organization, AAC utilizes a distributed funding model that splits funding between 5 core organizations. Emerging Arts Professionals provides cohort development and tools rooted in their 10-plus year fellowship cohort program. Diamond Wave provides fundraising, administration, evaluation, and technical assistance. And our organizational partners receive and manage artist funding and receive stipends to participate in the initiative's advisory circle. Our founding partners being lapena-culturalcenter, Movimiento de Arte y Cultura de Latinoamericana, or MACLA, and Somart's Cultural Center. This advisory circle also includes some of our funding partners that help us think through obstacles and guide the overall health and evolution of the program. I'll stop there and end this introduction with some words from Esailama Artry-Diouf, Program Officer of Arts and Culture at the San Francisco Foundation.
The arts and culture are critical to the health and development of our Bay Area communities. When accessible and broadly supported, cultural arts can and has transformed perceptions and dynamics of power and privilege associated with justice, equity, and accountability. At the San Francisco Foundation, we believe that a thriving Bay Area means a thriving arts and cultural sector that is economically secure, rooted in vibrant communities, and engaged in civic life. I think that what makes the Artist Adaptability Circle so special is that it is a community-created funding and technical assistance program designed to put Bay Area artists and arts workers back to work and creatively addressing the issues arising in their lives and their communities. By supporting our anchoring arts organizations and individual artists, we can preserve some of our endangered cultural practices and shift narratives on how we think about ourselves, our society, and our culture.
Hello, everyone, and welcome. We really appreciate you being here. I have the pleasure of introducing our panelists. who are going to offer a conversation about this beautiful work that we've been doing in the Bay Area. This presentation is about the Artist Adaptability Circle project, and we really appreciate all of you artists, advocates, activists, and NPN partners being here with us today. Our conversation members include the following people: Rhiannon Evans McFadgen, a curator, consultant, facilitator, and project-based artist from San Francisco with a background in folkloric dance and multidisciplinary visual arts. Rhiannon is a founder of A Simple Collective and Black and White Projects and the Society of the Smoky Mirror, founding member of the Pacific Felt Factory Arts Complex, and emeritus member of 3.9 Art Collective, dedicated to promoting the visibility of Black San Francisco-based artists and curators on the curatorial committee for Root Division, and is the director of emerging arts professionals. Chris Evans is an interdisciplinary artist trained in music and dance who cultivates sacred spaces for communal listening, healing, and transformation. She directs the Reconstruction Study Project and Reconstructing Imagination Residency. She co-founded Idora Park Project Space with Ernest Jolly, is a member of the Houseful of Black Women and Black and White Projects collectives. She is the founder of the Black Women's Self-Care Reparations Project. She is a certified Pilates instructor, massage therapist, Yamuna body rolling practitioner, and level 2 Talawa technique practitioner. Crystal Azul is a queer Chicanx interdisciplinary artist and arts educator and Bruja plant magic maker, whose work centers queerness, neurodivergence, ritual, and the body. They have worked with youth for over a decade and founded Queer Youth Arts in 2014. Their work, Aquí Estoy, was part of the 30th annual juried exhibition, Interconnected, at Southern Exposure Gallery in San Francisco. They are a co-drum keeper for Bay Area American Indian Two-Spirit Bates organizations, and they were lead artists for the Bates multimedia installation, Calling Us Home, Regresa at Soma Arts in San Francisco. Azul is the co-curator of the annual National Queer Arts Festival's visual art exhibition, which highlights the brilliance of QTLGBI plus artists. And lastly, myself, Tara Dalbo. I am the Deputy Executive Director of lapena-culturalcenter in Berkeley. I'm a graduate of Sarah Lawrence College in New York, a painter and a writer. I've studied the arts abroad in Florence, Italy. I'm currently an MPA candidate at UC Berkeley, and my professional experience includes grant writing for the UC Berkeley School of Public Health nonprofit Health Initiatives of the Americas, and consulting in the realm of both health and arts and culture. I've managed restaurants in San Francisco and Oakland. I've also served as a case manager for developmentally disabled adults with Easter Seals in Santa Fe, New Mexico, and worked for a hospital in Santa Fe as well, aiding recovering alcoholics and addicts. So we welcome you all to the space and appreciate you being here and hope that you enjoy this conversation. I'm going to pass the torch on to Rhiannon.
Thank you, Tara. I think the main thing I wanted to talk about for Artist Adaptability Circles is my own experience with both getting it started and why we ended up landed on this very unique format. This started from long conversations with a group of folks in the middle of shelter in place when we were trying to solve for all of these different issues. At the same time as we were meeting, this little group was meeting, I was also meeting regularly with a group of our sister organizations across California who also have arts leadership networks. And one of the conversations was, how do we solve for some of the problems that are happening to our networks? We had this sort of like problem solving triage activity where we broke down, well, what are the effects of what's going on? Because the first problem people wanted to solve was job loss. Well, okay, we can't solve for job loss right now because shelter in place is still happening. What are the effects of job loss that we can start solving for? And after sort of everyone started breaking things down, it came down to loss of resources, loss of community, and loss of purpose. And so thinking about how can we solve for those three things, one of the things that was also happening in the middle of shelter in place was mutual aid circles were abounding and solving sort of their own local issues. And this came up as a really great solution for our arts communities. And all of our organizations were able to go back to our networks across California and just start talking about how mutual aid circles could start being implemented by our networks to support our network members. So then I got to bring that back to these amazing conversations that we were having about how we could support in the Bay Area all of the artists who have lost their jobs, who've lost their communities, who had lost their purposes. And there had been, we had taken so many different courses. We talked about doing like listening sessions. We talked about doing data gathering. We talked about workshops. There were so many different things, and that was happening kind of everywhere else, but didn't seem like it was going to necessarily go anywhere. And so then after we'd had this idea about mutual aid circles, I brought it to the Artist Adaptability group, the sort of the thing that became the advisory group later. And what was really exciting about that was I think that was the first time I had really been, that I felt like I had been heard in a group like this. The group was filled with, other artist-run organizations, as well as funders and nonprofit organizations, sort of a room of people who actually make a difference and have power. And historically, I have not been particularly I haven't really felt like I had a voice in spaces like that. But because of this very particular group of people who had built so much trust over these conversations, this radical idea of creating a mutual aid circles for folks coming from somebody like me was really heard. And I really had a moment of feeling like very visible. So the whole thing sort of started with this amazing experience. And then as we started talking about what we can do and how we can do it, I started bringing in EAP, all of our curriculum. Emerging Arts Professionals has a 12-year history of doing curriculum development and cohort development for arts leaders. And so we used that foundation to create these like circles within circles within circles. And I really loved that opportunity to really be able to develop something collaboratively. I think one of the other things that was really unique is that no one organization owned this project, that it really became truly collective and collaborative. We are all stewards of it. There's no one organization that owns it. The money doesn't go to one organization. There's no like one IP. It's everybody. And I think that the fact that we even sort of founded it as a mutual aid circle, that us leaders wanted to get together and do something and help each other and support each other as our organizations were struggling. Then we created this new program. We brought in artists who we knew in our own experiences. I just was like layers on layers and layers of circles. And I think that is really the foundation of Artist Adaptability Circles, as well as the foundation of like how we keep doing this work. So I think that's sort of the crux of where I'm coming from in this, is just this opportunity to bring in EAP's long history of equity-centered cohort development, as well as my own excitement for things like mutual aid and coming up with radical shifts towards using older and more equity-centered models that have existed for a very long time in communities of color. I'm going to pass it on to Chris, who is was in our first set of circles and now is a second round. So Chris.
Thank you, Rhiannon. And Rhiannon is actually the reason that this project that started as an idea, Black women's self-care reparations, actually became something that was larger than me and is in the process of growing. I had the original idea of how can I bring more Black women into my practice to practice self-care through Pilates and body work. And I came to me that, well, what if we paid them? And then this idea of reparations came to mind, and I started I literally made a budget, and I was like, I think I can do this with 8 or 9 women for $10,000. And I was like, no one's going to fund this. And then, I mean, there was just so much, I can't think of what the word is, but a few weeks later, Rhiannon sent me a letter and asked if I wanted to apply for this project. And for me, this became an serendipity. For me, this became an opportunity to collaborate with others around what self-care for Black women actually looks like. And I would have gratefully been involved in the House Full of Black Women, which is a collective that's directed by Ellen Sebastian Chang and Amara Tabor Smith. And the group of women that came to be part of this Black Women's Self-Care Reparations are women that I grew to know and love in that community. And I just want to say their names: Toby Melora Corial, Keisha Turner, Yvette Phillips Aldama, and Sheila Russell. They are my sisters, and I knew that bringing them together in a circle to help think through what self-care looks like in a deep way, and how we could begin to practice it. And I think our larger question was how we move beyond a kind of life of survival into a life of thriving. And all of this emerged because we had this space and this funding in order to begin this exploration. I think what has been the greatest gift is that we were given funding, we were given this opportunity to hold space, to be in the unknown, we don't know, we still don't know, we're still looking for what self-care means, what sustaining self-care means, what a thriving life means, but we're in that process. And we're in that process because we, one, had the recognition of the importance of this, the support through AAC, and then we had actual funding to begin to bring in tools and to have experiences that have supported the movement toward our thriving lives. We are, I think, in this question of what mutual aid really means for us. I think there's Black women are often in the forefront of responding, as Rhiannon was, in the COVID crisis, to crises in our communities. And I think that there is a certain amount of activation and responsiveness that happens. But the question I'm starting to sit with is how do we practice mutual aid, both the giving and the receiving? And how do we do it in sustained ways when we're not in a crisis? Or can we understand that the crises are actually ongoing, of housing, of economic injustice, of all the things? So I'm deeply excited and grateful for the opportunity for us to do this work and have the support of AAC. And I'm gonna pass it to Crystal.
Hi, thank you. Thanks, Chris. I want to thank everyone here in the panel and the organizers, and I have so much gratitude for all of the work that everyone's been doing for decades and beyond. I first heard of Artist Adaptability Circles through my friend and fellow artist, Trisha Rainwater, who nominated me to apply for the AAC. And I immediately was very curious and excited about this work because of the way that it's set up in terms of like the collaboration and collectivism and the mutual aid aspects. And so, yeah, I feel very grateful to be here amongst this amazing cohort. So I'm the second cohort this year. For years, I've been thinking about all of the brilliant work that Two-Spirit and Indigenous queer people are doing here in the Bay Area, right? And I've just noticed that there's all these pockets of really interesting projects. Folks are doing something over here, folks are over here, you know, and I thought, how can we connect and create a stronger web, right? How do we connect all these diverse projects that we're all connected by like our rootedness in like ceremony and like the land and our work with decolonizing our ways of being. And so that was really the jumping off point for me. It's like, all right, I really want us to all work together. How do I do this? I've been thinking about this for a while. Also interested in more like brick and mortar spaces in the Bay Area, which, you know, is a difficult thing to call in, right? But so I reached out to some folks that I've been working with, Ruth Villaseñor of Bates, Bay Area American Two-Spirit organization, Zamora, who's another Two-Spirit drum keeper, Tlahuis Papalot, who's in danza community, the Mexica danza community, and Edgar Fabian Frias, who is a non-binary artist here in the Bay and Los Angeles. Because I wanted a group of cultural workers, artists, activists, folks who really emphasize like ritual and ceremony in their work and prayer and rootedness in community through that ceremony. And I'll end there and I'll pass it along to Tara.
Thank you so much, Crystal. I'm really appreciating hearing everyone's journey and experience, and definitely see some reflections of my own in some of the stories and the history with this project. For me, the starting point was in those origin conversations and that percolation period when Esailama G. Artry-Diouf from the San Francisco Foundation reached out to myself and quite a few of us and pulled us all together. And essentially, in responsiveness, said, you know, where's the need? Where's the need in our communities? What's not being done? What should be done? And how do we address that need? And then those conversations, they took some time and they were organic and they evolved, and more people and voices and perspectives came in order to contribute to that evolution. And we built upon this foundation that Rhiannon brought in of the mutual aid circles from EAP and added to it these ideas of really funding what's present in the Bay Area, the people that we know to be artists and culture bearers who are doing this work already and wanting to support the work that they're already doing rather than asking them to ultimately jump through hoops for resources, right? To fit the work that they're doing for the resources that are available in the moment. This was tied to marginalized communities. It was tied to BIPOC communities. It was tied to COVID. It was tied to emergency and response, but it was also, I think, rooted in a need that was there consistently, foundationally within the greater ecosystem of the Bay Area, which is that there are so many incredible artists and there is so much incredible work that's being done. And there's such a need for resources and there's such a need for trust and philanthropy, for systems that aren't built on a trickle-down hierarchical basis, right? On a model that essentially dictates the idea and then filters the resource through the idea. What we did was we did something that was a little bit more like a quilt. It was a quilt that gathered together many different concepts and tried to integrate them. And those concepts, I think, included the idea of funding what was there and present, supporting the culture bearers and artists that we've worked with and have known not to receive as much funding as many other individuals and organizations historically within the Greater Bay Area. But in addition to that, there's this piece of professional development. There's this piece of community building and engagement and relationship building in the way that the project is evolving, the way that it has evolved, and the way that it was built. And I think what's most beautiful to me is, and Rhiannon, you spoke to this, that big table where all of the voices are heard, and so much of those perspectives came into the percolation of this project in a way that, working at a nonprofit and, like working with artists and funders regularly, I very, very infrequently see. I very infrequently see all of us coming together as people and sharing our experiences and then working together collectively to make something happen that we feel like is needed. Oftentimes what I see instead is our systems, right? We have our funders, we have our organizations, we have our artists, we have our advocates, we have our activists, and there's this world, this pyramid that they need to fit into in order for work to happen. And it's been interesting to even as we're moving into multiple years and multiple years of evolution, to see different voices come in too, and to plan for voices cycling out, and to see the streamlining and the shifting of the systems for this project as well. The willingness, the emergent strategy, ultimately still, and it's creationism, to keep on changing it and updating it and making it better, and for it to suit the needs of the people who are involved. And I would like to see more of that. And I hope that in offering this model, perhaps we can influence some of that change and some of that trust. So we're going to segue into a different portion of the conversation now. And essentially, what we're going to do is have a little dialogue amongst all of us and ask each other some questions and sort of see what direction it goes and how it evolves. So I'm going to start with Rhiannon, and I would love to hear from you as an artist and a person and a leader in this field, how this experience has directly impacted you and what you've taken away from it.
I need 3 days to answer that. The impact has been huge. I can't overstate it because I can't state it enough. It's been the one thing I just keep thinking as everyone's talking is this whole project and everything about it, the foundation of it is trust. And it's not something, trust is maybe one of the most valuable resources that we have, and it is in short supply. And I think one of the amazing things about doing this project was we built trust with each other, this group of people who kept meeting. It started with a few people and then brought more people in and more people in. And I think I was in maybe was brought in on the third meeting and got to see most of it grow. And to have a circle of people, to have this group of people where we were talking about the industry as a whole and bringing in ourselves, that we weren't coming in as director of EAP or funder of XYZ, but we were coming in as human beings who knew each other and had worked with each other. And even if we didn't know everybody knew somebody and had a history of building trust. And then we kept talking to each other and built more trust. And then it was all people who trusted also artists already. I think everybody who was in there either already had a deep experience being artists. It's amazing how many people have real arts and culture practices in the group, no matter what role they play. I think that was also where the trust was built, was we need to be heard ourselves, not just be representing the system, but we're now humans, and everything kind of got ripped away during that first part of shelter in place. And it was sort of a beautiful moment of clarity where we stopped trying to pretend that we were these like machines and that our hats, we always joke about I'm putting this hat on and that hat on. It's like all hats off. These are the experiences we have, and we represent our experiences and the resources that we hold. And that alone has never changed. Since that moment, I have stopped pretending to put hats on. I have stopped saying I'm only representing this or that. And so that was hugely freeing. But then to also have a group of people who I respected so much, to trust them and to be trusted by them. Then the added bonus of being able to then find something that I knew would work, because we've done it for centuries, millennia, right? This idea of mutual aid circles is what we all do, especially in communities of color, that's just how we've survived and how we've thrived. And to be able to then take people that I have loved working with who have amazing ideas and amazing communities and be able to like hand money and hand trust over to them and know that that is then growing that support and can continue to ripple out. I just like, I'm getting like warm just thinking about it, and it's very exciting. It is also exciting to have this format sort of documented, to be able to be like, see, it works. Like, it genuinely works. And it works because everybody trusted each other and let people be themselves, instead of trying to crowbar ourselves into roles or into certain kinds of reports or, play some kind of game. And I think that was life-changing. And I'm trying to bring it into all of the work that I'm doing right now. It's made it so that I can work on my own artwork more and recognize that me as an artist is not separate from me as a director of an arts organization. And not separate from being a facilitator. So, and to be able to know that these folks that I just love and have known for so long are getting supported, and then meet new folks and want to know and get deeply, maybe too much invested in the work that you're doing. So yeah, it just feels like whole. It feels like there's something more whole than was before.
Would you like to ask a question of someone, Rhiannon?
Yes. Again, just when everyone was talking, thinking again of that trust. I would love to hear, and I want to actually direct this a little bit to both artists who are in the program. We're all artists, let me say, Chris and Crystal, who are being funded in this program. Thinking about that concept of trust, what your initial thought was when you first heard about this program, and how it has changed or not changed since you've started it. Chris, as somebody who's now starting a second round, and Crystal, who is like just getting to start with the program. I'll start with Chris, because Chris, your seniority.
I was like, Crystal, do you want to? Yeah, I think that as you were talking about trust, Rhiannon, I was thinking about all of the levels of trust that have been built into this whole structure. And I think for me, there has been just a kind of consistent, from the very consistent expression of trust in what I and my collaborators are doing, without need for explanation, for documentation, for product, any of that stuff. And it's so unusual. Like, I remember sort of feeling like, really? They're not going to take it away, are they? And I was the second year, I was, I knew that you all were doing the best you could for us, but I was assuming, it'll be, little grant here to kind of keep us going. And it was full support for what we're doing. And it's what we're doing in this, this deeply, I was thinking about what Crystal said about decolonizing work, like for Black women to begin to care for themselves, to sort of really deeply find health and well-being and rest, like that's good for everybody. And I think trusting that process, which is messy and unknown and hard, has been pretty incredible. I think the trust that I had with my collaborators has been super, super important for us to hold this space as we move through very challenging kind of moments in our lives and moments in this process. Yeah, I think that's that. Yeah, I think that's all I have to say about trust. Krista?
Yes, thank you. Trust. I know that is the key word right there. Yeah, I think like this program project is a delightfully anti-capitalist, endeavor. Like I love it. It's a paradigm shift. Like you were saying too, Chris, like having that sense of like, wait, is this real? Is this okay? Like, because there's other folks in the circle, in our circle, that our círculo, who, I've had to like repeatedly coach them on like, it's okay. Like you can breathe into this space. You are not like, we're not being told that we have to produce, that we have to have this bottom line. And like, thankfully, like it's not a completely new idea for me, because like I have some experience with that in the world of education that I'm in, where like I do work with like Agency by Design Oakland. So there's like this liberatory design work that I've been doing. And that's helped me to also understand how these new systems or shifts in system allow us to have more space to show up as whole people and authenticity, right? And not as like a bottom line, not as a profit margin, not as, a deliverable. And so just that flexibility is such a dream, and it's healing, right? There's like this healing around money and financial support, and around organizations and institutions, and the relationship between artists and culture workers and institutions or organizations. I feel like this also is, I see it within our cohort and within our circle, that our standards for how we work with organizations and funders is changed because of this experience, right? Because we're like, oh no, it can be like this. Clearly, you just have to decide that it's this way. So I think knowing that this is a possibility, and experiencing it, it's like this embodied, change in this embodied understanding of how money can work and how it can flow, and how our art and our creative pursuits and cultural work can receive funding. Like it's just, and it's worthy of funding. It's such a beautiful thing. And I also have really appreciated a lot of tools, right, that help to build out our capacities for facilitating and for the mutual aid work, and for just like different tools for organizing and structuring the way that we meet, the way that we can be simultaneously, we're in this sort of like liminal nebulous space, in these in-between worlds, but we are also making moves to like put our work into action, right? So I think like we're doing both, but I think there just is more compassion and empathy built in with AAC that does allow us this freedom to be creative, right? Because that's what you need. Like you need this without all the strings attached to really have interesting new ideas and interesting work that gets created, right? When you don't have those strings attached. But yeah, I've really appreciated and I guess that's where the trust comes in, right? Because I see how much work y'all have put into this, right? Into the, like, every step of the way. I think every meeting, it's so thoughtfully co-designed, right? The design of the work feels really just so thoughtful in taking into account our humanity, that you can't help but trust. And then that does help us to open up, right? Our spirits open up more, and we are able to share more, I think, in that way. And it's, yeah, I would just say overall, it feels like a very healing experience with an organization and a group of people. Yeah.
Could I ask a question? What's coming up as you were talking, Rhiannon, and as you were talking, Crystal, you know, there are so many beautiful things about this program, and there is also something that is hard about accepting blessings. And I'm you know, I have seen myself kind of go through many layers of peeling away some of the assumptions that are not, they don't even look exactly like race or gender or age or any of the sort of specific characteristics that we can often identify as being structured in our system. There are all these assumptions about worth, assumptions about productivity, assumptions about planning and doing and achieving and time, as you were pointing out, Rhiannon. And I keep finding myself peeling away layers of those assumptions, and it has been deep through COVID and has continued in this process of this project. And I'm wondering, this could be for anybody, but I am curious, Rhiannon and Tara, as part of the creating of this very different funding structure and platform, what are some of the things you bumped up against in yourself and realized, oh, that's what that is? I'm just curious, as from the artist perspective, as receiving all of the gifts of your work.
Yeah. I love that question. I think, you know, one thing I want to do is call in Ebony McKinney, who is the co-founder of Emerging Arts Professionals, who passed away, I think 2 years into my taking over the directorship. And Ebony co-founded EAP with Adam Fong, and the two of them created EAP to be a way for people to break down the structures and think deeply. And I always think of Ebony whenever anything comes up, she always goes, there's this like sound that she always made. And then there was this time that always passed for a moment. And I think that mindset that EAP is founded on is all I had been doing since I was a fellow. And I think I was cohort 5, so 2014, 2015. And I'm so grateful for that, because then I have this deep foundation and layers, thinking about layers and layers and layers of breaking these things down, that it felt really comfortable for me to say, let's try this completely different thing. What was totally uncomfortable for me was to then bring it into a group where there was layers and layers of assumed hierarchies, funders with quantities of money around them that I could never even fathom. And really being able to trust my own, like I think at that point I had more trust in everybody else than I had in myself. And being able to say, like, I know that I can help create a structure here through these conversations. I have enough background in breaking down these assumptions, which removing assumptions. EAP has this equity framework, and we have 4 tenets of our framework, and one of them is removing assumptions. It was like the number one thing we wanted to do. And the key to removing assumptions is that we take more time to get to know every single person that we work with. That means every new member that comes in, we have one-on-one conversations with. It means the systems, the like institutional aspects of our organization have to take a back seat to the one-on-one interactions. And I that is where I feel most comfortable, because it's how I've been functioning. I think it's how I always functioned, and like felt like I was stuck in this bubble of like, am I crazy? What's happening around me? Then joined EAP and was able to use it. But the assumptions of walking into this room and thinking, well, funders are never going to believe this. Funders are going to think this is crazy. And I would go into some of these conversations with 20 different reasons why they should believe me, and never had to use any of them. Or maybe I had to use 1 or 2 only to argue one version versus another, right? And so I think that even my own assumptions of like allowing people to trust me, even now I still am ready. I have to have 27 different reasons why we should do this thing. And I still go into meetings and they're like, okay, and there's follow-up questions. And those things end up being just answers to follow-up questions, and not the fight that I was ready to go into. And I think that was the hugest thing, was just to recognize that there are actually other people, and that a lot of people who have influence are also just humans and want to have these conversations and make this impact. So I think that was my, like, I still need to get used to trusting my own knowledge. You'd think by now I would, but I still don't.
I think that's a really good question. And I had a little bit of a journey too, similarly. Lapena over the past few years has gone through a really interesting process through a program called Leveraging a Network for Equity, LANE, which is actually tied to the National Performance Network. And it's also tied to the Mellon Foundation. And essentially what we did was we looked at every aspect of our organization with the support of an organizational consultant, 2 financial consultants, Beatrice Thomas, Shruti Garg, Trella Walker, and a cohort facilitator, Sage Crump, and the aid of our peers too. I mean, there was a mutual aid component in this work, 100%, because this was a cohort of really beautiful arts and culture organizations that started off this process in rocky waters and were either serving communities of color or led by people of color, or a combination of the two, or serving marginalized communities. And the journey to moving out of rocky waters wasn't, here's some money, fill the gap, right? The journey was a 3-year boot camp with our leadership team, where we worked very, very, very closely for a significant period of ongoing time with experts in their fields in order to really understand our mission, our values, our vision, our finances, our true costs, how all of that intersects, and make educated considerations and decisions from that point forward, and be able to think strategically and to plan and to take a step back and zoom out and look at the big picture, and to pause and not be caught up by the weeds, and know that the term I'd love to use is liberatory infrastructure, which Sage Crump pulled out for this process. Know that liberatory infrastructure is very deeply tied to emergent strategy, also a concept of what structures actually serve us instead of us serving them, right? And if they're not serving us, how do they evolve? How do we create enough malleability within them to change them as they're needed? And from that journey, we've been able to create fiscal health. We've been able to hire more staff. We are projecting years out, we're building our earned income, and we're continuing to learn and grow and evolve and live in that emergent strategy, liberatory infrastructure space, and create these decisions from a place that's really thoughtful. That's not to say that we don't get like wildly in the weeds and too responsive sometimes and get caught up in the moment. It happens all the time, but there's an education and a platform there, I think, that served me to be a part of this. I'm not sure that I couldn't have been a part of, I'm not sure that I could have played this kind of role in this percolation development process without that previous experience. Because this, I mean, Chris, you named it, it is uncomfortable. It is uncomfortable to be like in conversation with people who you respect and admire, and you feel like are bringing so much to that conversation and not know where it's going to go, how it's going to develop, if it's going to develop, if it's going to be of value, if it's going to be significant, if it's going to be more of the same, or if you can actually create and be a part of a gift. And I think for all of us, there was that same sort of liberatory infrastructure, that same sort of pause, step back, really look at everything holistically, which is where the healing lies, right? Because if you're putting a Band-Aid on it and you're being purely responsive, then you're not looking holistically. And you're not going to look at the integrated component, and you're not going to address the root issues and make the change that needs to happen, right? And give it space and process. I think what's beautiful about this project is that it is about process and space and artistic healing and journey more than product, which obviously our culture really emphasizes product to a very high degree. And I think oftentimes to our detriment, certainly to our artists' detriment, right? Because that's the journey of expression. And you can't express if you're under a windmill of time that's just twirling you around incessantly, right? I think in order for this to function, in order for this to develop the way that it did, we all needed to kind of lean into the uncomfortability of not knowing what it was, what it could be, and trust what each of us had to offer, and trust that by way of making those offerings, we could create a change and maybe create something a little bit different, a little bit more like what we wanted to see in the world. And so for me, I wanted to name that foundation because I think that it really lifted my ability to then do something like that again. And I think having this experience has continued to lift my ability to do something like that again, and has really made me want to continue to work in this way. I think we're coming up on time for this part of the conversation and moving into closing remarks before our Q&A. So I'd love to open the floor back up again to you all for your closing remarks.
I can start. See people's thinkings. I think in this conversation, which I feel like is just scratching the surface. Again, this is like such a deep and layered thing. Is sort of two things that come to mind around this, and also really thinking about specifically how the industry as a greater whole, how everybody, even outside of the Bay Area, can really think of this. Is one of the biggest things that I've learned from all of this work is the assumption that it just takes too much time. And the reality is it saves a lot of time. That this process, that doing things in this different way, we waste so much time on the mechanics of the system and the institution. And in this system, things just happen so much faster. It's just that the time is going into a different place. It's emphasized in different spaces. It's not emphasized in mechanics and reports and all of those things. It's emphasized on the time that we're doing something together. And that is the shift. And so just that question of assumption is a really big thing to think about, as that was a big assumption that, and in the equity work that I do outside of here, there's always this, why are we, quote, wasting so much time talking to each other at the beginning of every meeting or things like that? And I think the reality is in in 100% of the time, spaces where we spend time with each other beforehand and build the human side of it and emphasize that time, we have saved so much time later on. Hour-long meeting, 30 minutes checking in with each other, 15 minutes talking, leave 15 minutes early. Whereas the other ones, it's like, oh, an hour over. So it's just that it is actually a time saver. And then the other thing is to just remember that artists are not actually producers of product, that artists are service providers, not product makers. And if we are funding artists to make products, we are not funding artists as who they actually are. And the AAC's format is really about making better service providers, giving more time to learn the things that you're doing. And in the same way you would do with social work and the same thing that you would do in therapy, it's not about producing, it's about making better service. And so I think those are the things that I would hope that other folks can take from this.
I may just jump in really quickly and say that I think we all do this work for community building and for human voices and expression and the beauty of what that is and the process and the journey and what that can do to the psyche. And that needs space and nuance, and ideally it should evolve and grow. And sometimes our systems hold us stagnant. And we're definitely in a time with this sort of world of philanthropy and funding and organizations and individual artists and advocates and activists where everyone's looking at the system and asking, like, how can it be better? How can it be different? And I think that's what this was born out of. And I think we need to keep on doing that work because it should be better and it should be different and it should serve more of us and not inhibit the work that we're here to do.
I would like to just make a call out to all funders to really look at how much money you have, how much money you actually give, and can we begin to decolonize that process? Can we really put enough money into artists, community, culture, like the people who need it, hands, so that people can feel whole, so that people can can live without the stress of day to day, where am I going to live? How am I going to pay my bills? So that we can begin to create communities from the gifts of all of the individuals that make up our rich and diverse communities. And this begins a ripple. This process begins, those circles are rippling out. And I would just hope that foundations who have lots and lots of money start to rethink how they can truly fund and truly trust the people that they're funding.
Yes, Chris, you took the words out of my mouth. I was just like, funders, just give your money away. But really, like, trusting, right? Like, trusting. And I hope that folks, like, just reach out to AAC, reach out to these folks and find out how is this possible, right? How is it possible for other orgs to do this work and connect with funders and I just like leverage, the resources that we have to, reimagine, right? This is all about reimagining and co-creation of a new world, right? And we've talked, and many people have talked about the pandemic, the pan dulce as a portal, right? And we went through the portal. I think we're still going through it. And it's like, where do we want to end up on the other side, right? It's time for change, it's time. It's been time. And there's just like this moment right now where stars are aligned and people are feeling really just ready for something new and done with the old. So it's exciting. And I think it's just important for all of us to kind of strike while the iron's hot and keep keep moving with this momentum for change, right? I feel it. It's really exciting. And just always remembering like that the beauty of AAC is that these folks, these organizers have created these conditions for us to imagine something different, right? And just really designing, being aware of how you design a program and systems to support this creative work, because we need this, right? We need creativity, arts, dance, music. It's about the spirit, it's about the soul, it's about connection, it's about returning to source. And it's a very powerful, transformative gift, right, that we can tap into. So, yeah, thank you.
On that beautiful and impactful end note, we are going to roll into our Q&A. So we're going to shift our visuals to some slides for you all and some music in the background. We'll be responding to questions in the chat and request that you please direct your question to an individual so we don't end up typing over each other and can just answer really clearly and directly. Thank you so much for being here with us. Bye.